This may come as a surprise to some of you, but Dana White and the UFC are not huge fans of the MMA media. I know, it's a shocking revelation. And while it seems like this contentious relationship has escalated in recent years, and it has, make no mistake about it that this is a tale as old as the promotion. And so today we're going to be running through 10 times things really came to a head between the UFC and the Fourth Estate. And sometimes things got pretty ugly.
Alright guys, let's take a quick break here for just a second. You know your full name, your email, home address, all that information is out there. It's actually pretty scary what you can find out with just a simple Google search. What's even more concerning is how that data is being sold. And that's where Aura, today's sponsor, comes in. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits an opt-out request. Pretty handy. Aura cleans up your information, which not only helps reduce the amount of spam you're gonna get, but it also protects me from hackers, bad actors, people online who are trying to get access to your social media accounts, your bank information, or anything sensitive. And in this day and age, being safe online is becoming increasingly more important. Aura does so much more than protect you from the online threats that you can't see. You also get other features like antivirus, VPN, password protection, parental control, even identity theft insurance, and more without having to download a bunch of different apps. I value my privacy and you should value yours. Check out aura.com/MMAonPoint and get started with your free 2-week trial. Link is in the description below. Alright, back to the video.
I'm Tommy from MMA On Point. A massive thank you to our channel Hall of Famers, and these are the 10 biggest blow-ups between the UFC and the media. Number 10, presser beefs. So the thing about Dana White is he's going to tell you if he doesn't like your question at a media scrum or a press conference. And this has happened so regularly over the years.
What the fuck are you asking me right now? You're like double talking.
That this whole list could just be filled with times Dana got pissed while at the podium. So rather than that, because it's nowhere near as interesting as these other entries, we're just gonna lump them all together here.
Kevin, I'm curious, what is the issue there?
I called him baby girl and he got mad.
Guys, come on, these two aren't even fighting. Knock it off.
All right, okay.
What, do you have a question about the fight, who these guys are fighting, or you just want to start shitting here?
There's not one presser moment that for me stands out far above the rest in terms of the level of animosity. I feel like if White doesn't like the question you're asking, he'll be as dismissive or biting as he would be regardless of who asked it.
Dana, I'm sorry, that was a respectful question. Your answer was disrespectful. That came from you, okay?
But the long history of contention between White and various media members at these press events does paint a picture of the promoter and the UFC's attitudes towards MMA media that aren't just there to ask about how big the gate was.
The deal that I just cut for Slap is bigger than the UFC deal we cut with Spike TV after the first season of The Ultimate Fighter. I don't give a shit what the media says about it. They don't matter.
Number 9, 299 confusion. Back in early January, DFW announced a banger of a fight for UFC 299, that of Dustin Poirier and Benoit Saint-Denis, and the violence gods were happy. But about a month later, the Diamond tweeted with no explanation that the fight was off. As everyone was scrambling to figure out what the heck happened, MMA Fighting's Guilherme Cruz posted that the fight was never official, and that he spoke with BSD's coach a few weeks earlier, who said he and his fighter found out about the bout when Dana announced it. Later that same day, Dustin hopped back on Twitter to say that there was a misunderstanding and that the fight was on, with many speculating that the misunderstanding was related to large quantities of money. White took to IG shortly after to refute Cruz in the Dana-ist way possible, sharing a screenshot of his messages with Benoit about the fight prior to its announcement, where he added a caption that read, "Hey Guilherme Cruz, go fuck yourself, scumbag." He followed that up with some more commentary. "You media guys are such pieces of shit, writing whatever clickbait you can to be first and not right. This is why nobody trusts or likes you. Guilherme Cruz, double middle finger emojis." Alright, I think his stance on Guilherme is pretty clear. This one is a bit confusing considering it was BSD's coach that told Cruz they didn't know, and if it was official, what was that whole thing with Dustin then? I'll tell you what it all is, just another day in mixed martial arts. Number 8, RIP Cage Potato. If you started watching with Conor and Ronda, you're probably not too familiar with Cage Potato, which now exists kinda in Twitter form, and I think some of their old stuff now redirects to Low Kick MMA, so I'm not entirely sure who owns it anyway. Doesn't matter, let's talk about 2012. Cage Potato was an MMA news site, but with a satirical edge to it, an edge that was maybe a bit too sharp when under a picture of Dana White and Jon Jones from a Bud Light commercial in an article about the promotion now sponsoring the fighter, they wrote, "Not only am I paying Jones to wear UFC logos in his walkout gear next weekend, I also placed a $500,000 bet that he'd beat Rashad. Oh shit, I guess I shouldn't have said that out loud." The joke didn't land with the UFC, who had their legal team write up their own funny caption, "Retract this or we'll see you in court." Cage Potato complied. In a tweet that has since been deleted, when asked if they were cool after the retraction, Dana White replied, "Not even close." And yeah, they never really had a great relationship before the caption, but certainly not afterwards. Number 7, the UFC's 10-year plan. Back in late 2009, Dana White wrote an op-ed for the Las Vegas Sun that started with this sentence: "The UFC will be the biggest sport in the world by 2020, followed by White's explanation as to why that would be the case. This prompted a lot of talk in the MMA community and prompted writer Jake Rawson to make his own opinion piece for SureDog on White's claims. Jake's takes didn't end up aging particularly well here, citing financial trouble in the UAE and how they wouldn't be a viable market, and he remained skeptical that a US brand like the UFC would be able to get a strong foothold internationally. He did think the sport was going to grow, just not to the biggest sport in the world. And while yes, he certainly was right about that, I think the UFC's growth has far exceeded the expectations of everyone and makes the 2020 prediction of White a bit stronger in retrospect. But that's not really what we're here for. White posted a vlog in response to the piece on UFC's YouTube channel, absolutely slamming Rawson.
Like, I give a fuck what Jake Rawson thinks. What the fuck has this guy ever done to move the sport of MMA forward?
While in retrospect, White looks like he was vindicated, this was more about the usual complaints of negativity and not promoting the fights rather than a disagreement on the future. And I mean, it was 2009. Who the hell could have possibly predicted how big this would get, other than Dana White? Number 6. What's his name? If there's a number 1 most hated journalist by Dana White, I think Darren Rovell might be the dark horse for that distinction. And if not, White certainly loves to talk shit about him. We could easily make a top 10 of things Dana got pissed at the sports business analyst about, but the big ones are breaking the story that the UFC was being sold in 2016, having the ice cold take that Amanda Nunes just destroyed the women's divisions by defeating both Ronda Rousey and Chris Cyborg.
And he says the UFC got destroyed tonight because Chris Cyborg lost and Amanda Nunes won and she's not marketable at all and fucking, you know?
And of course, like so many on this list, being skeptical of the UFC's plans to move forward during COVID. White regularly pretends to forget Rovell's name at press conferences before absolutely torching him on some take he had.
There, what's his name? The dipshit that thinks he knows about this business. Rovell, Darren Rovell, yeah. Dipshit Darren Rovell.
Dana has a pillow originally gifted to him in t-shirt form by Rob Fox that sits in the green room of the UFC HQ that says, "What the fuck does Darren Rovell know about fighting?" How many on this list, or really anywhere in the world, can say there's a pillow dedicated to hating them? Number 5. The original UFC media clashes. You think that the Dana White-led UFC was the only version of this promotion to go at it with the media? Nope, this has pretty much been a war fought since the very beginning. Once calls for bans on MMA became prevalent in the mid-90s, then UFC owner Bob Meyrowitz fought the good fight in local papers, trying to explain that the sport wasn't any more violent than boxing, and in fact had no deaths, unlike boxing.
However, the promoters point out that many sports have a high risk of injury.
It's my contention that you watch any football game and you see jerseys full of blood. You watch any boxing match and you see fighters full of blood. You watch any hockey game and you see blood streaming.
He was also quoted in national media like the New York Times echoing the same sentiment. The sport is safe and good business. He would eventually end up on an episode of Larry King Live in 1995 along Ken Shamrock, arguing for MMA's widespread regulation against Senator John McCain and then NSAC head Mark Ratner.
Well, it's a sport. It's a chance where you can go in and test your ability against someone else's ability.
While sadly much of these efforts by Meyrowitz and the UFC are lost to time, and they certainly didn't have the flair that White does, SEG's UFC was just as contentious with the media, albeit usually for entirely different reasons than future regimes. Number 4. Ariel gets banned. Yeah, so Dana White and Ariel Helwani have had a complicated relationship over the years. In the early days, it seemed White was happy to have the 13-time World MMA Awards Journalist of the Year around, and their interviews helped boost Helwani's profile, even if at times they would get contentious with each other.
I was saying he was the best at the time. Obviously, things have changed.
Which was insane.
Matter of opinion, right? No, it was insane. It was insane.
But things would gradually sour over time, and all of it blew up in the lead up to UFC 200. At the pay-per-view prior, Helwani, who was at the event, tweeted a bombshell that the long-retired Brock Lesnar would be returning for the 200 card. Everyone lost their minds, and then sure enough, only a few hours later on the broadcast, that classic Lesnar 200 trailer dropped confirming Helwani's scoop. But then following the main event, Ariel would tweet that he'd been escorted out of the building, further elaborating later in interviews and on the MMA Hour that he and his MMA fighting colleagues were banned for life from events as a result of the Lesnar reveal.
I was asked by a PR person to go to the back because Dana White wanted to speak to me, and we went to the back. Dana was standing there. He was visibly upset, and he said, "Get out of here. You're done. Your credentials are gone. You're not welcome here ever again. Lorenzo hates you. Go cover Bellator."
With the UFC claiming that the leak had strained relationships at the office since it was such a small circle who knew Brock was returning. With the media rounds he had done and his own discussion on the topic, Ariel's ban had hit mainstream news, and in the mounting backlash, the UFC would do a 180, lifting the lifetime ban officially via a press release on their website a whole 24 hours later. But of course, it was not over. A few weeks later on the UFC Unfiltered podcast, White would make it clear that he still wasn't a big fan of Ariel.
You know, what can I sneak and get out and steal from the fans instead of actually doing some real journalism? So it was dirty. He knows it was dirty, and he threw a big pity party for himself, crying on camera and shit.
Number 3, Dana White versus Josh Gross. Way before Ariel breaking the Lesnar story broke the MMA internet, OG MMA journalist Josh Gross became UFC persona non grata for revealing on a podcast the finalists for the 4th season of Tough before an episode had aired. Not that they were exactly on friendly terms before, as Gross was already banned from events, and not for 24 hours, but forever for real. Josh, who gave a spoiler warning before naming the fighters, said that because the 4th season was crowning title contenders instead of UFC contracts, the scoop was news and relevant to the fandom. Dana and company's feelings about Josh would only continue to sour after the Tough thing. They'd clash on fighter pay. He broke the Vitor Belfort adverse test results prior to UFC 152 story, and like many others on this list, came at Gross about his COVID criticisms. But the biggest thing seemed to be that Tough spoiler. Back when the story broke, the UG, White took to posting on the board to say, "You are the biggest idiot I have ever met in this industry." I don't know if anyone has ever seen Josh Gross, but the guy has never done anything athletic in his entire life. So yeah, probably not exchanging Christmas cards, I would guess. Number 2, the Loretta Hunt vlog. Back in April of 2009, Sherdog writer Loretta Hunt posted an article about some potential backstage changes related to the UFC and their handling of managers and agents. After having spoken with several managers, one of which agreed to be quoted in the interview under anonymity, Hunt explained that her sources were told that they would no longer be given backstage credentials on fight nights, with the anonymous manager going on to speculate that the UFC was trying to drive a wedge between them and their clients. The article prompted a vlog post from Dana White that was deleted 2 days later when it received public backlash for, well, just take a look.
To write a story that says, "Oh, and here's a quote from a guy who wanted to remain anonymous because of fear of repercussions from the..." Shut the fuck up. Whoever gave you that quote is a pussy and a fucking a fucking liar. Everything that comes out of your mouth is fucking stupid.
A day after the post was taken down, White spoke with ESPN to issue an apology, not to Hunt, which he wanted to make clear, but to anyone he might have hurt incidentally, going on to say, quote, "At the end of the day, the worst thing for me is that I don't want anybody thinking that it's cool to say that word, especially now that I know it's as powerful as the N-word. I don't want these kids out there watching me and thinking it's cool. I don't want that." Number 1, the COVID Victory video. Alright, so you know the whole Dusky. I'm not gonna run through what happened, you were all there. Anyway, as you might imagine when everything shut down, there was a lot of speculation and criticism levied at the UFC by the MMA media, the mainstream media, figures from other sports, and randos online, since the promotion was going to be the first major sport to try and go ahead and continue having events after 2 months without a card. This effort led to Fight Island and the utilization of the Apex, and ended up being a giant success for the promotion. Despite a lot of difficulties and fight cancellations, it was one of the biggest booms they'd had in a while. And while given the uncertainty of what was happening at the time, you would think that the UFC might have understood where people were coming from and say, well, we get why you thought this, but look at how it turned out. They kinda did that, minus the understanding thing. In a 5-minute video released in late 2020 that can only be described as dramatic to the point of being hilarious, titled "The UFC versus the Media," the promo package team at the promotion, who do such a fantastic job of hyping up fights, used their skills to call out specific media members and forward an enemy of the people type narrative related to the coverage of the UFC's attempt to get going again during the pandemic. This bizarre video would disappear for a while but be re-uploaded in 2022 for some reason on the UFC YouTube channel. The reason it's number one, well, one, the effort, I don't know how much this thing cost, but more importantly, it's pretty much been the tone setter going forward for the UFC as they relate to media outlets that have anything negative to say. I'll tell you who I've never had a single negative word about in my life, and that is the editor of this video, Luke Taylor. He always absolutely kills these edits. Please follow him on all his socials and go check out his YouTube channel. Another massive shout to our channel Hall of Famers. Guys, we got a new lower price of $7.99. Hit that join button, there's all kinds of cool content. If not, no biggie, liking and subscribing would be awesome as well. Let me know what you thought about the video down in the comments below, and have yourselves a wonderful day. Thanks a lot for watching.